My guest today is Mark Aronson, Rutgers University professor, author of middle grade and young adult nonfiction, speaker and publisher. Thank you, Professor Aronson, for joining us for this second edition of the Common Core. You're an expert on it, and we really feel conversation about the Common Core is really valuable. In our last segment on the Common Core, we did talk about what the Common Core was. If you wouldn't mind sort of briefly recapping,
Sure.
what do we mean by Common Core?
Right. To be quick, we're talking about today the English language arts standards. There are also standards for math and for science. These are adopted individually by the states. The English language arts standards were created by a group which is now being carried on by a group called Student Achievement Partners. If you want to learn a little more, go to their website, which is called Achieve the Core. Mm-hmm. And it was designed to look at where young people need to be when they leave school after 12th grade. What set of skills do they need to have to function well in the modern world? Common Core does not mandate curriculum. Curriculum is set by individual states, by individual districts, even within the school building by curriculum supervisors. It is just that that content is woven with a band of ever greater challenge in skills. And in particular, one of the reasons I really like the Common Core is Common Core wants to give young people that experience of endorphins of the mind. That is thinking, using your brain ever more on challenging text, challenging ideas, comparing and contrasting ideas. One thing that Common Core emphasizes or wants to emphasize is depth over breadth.
Okay.
That we want young people to read less, more deeply, rather than to cover a lot to get quick answers on multiple choice tests.
In our last segment, we spent some time talking about the emphasis on informational text versus fiction, and I know you've said that really it's not to the exclusion of fiction, but there has perhaps been an underemphasis in your mind on informational text. Could you summarize again briefly what you think are some of the benefits of reading informational text?
Well, some of the benefits of reading good author-driven informational text are, one, engagement.
What would that look like, by the way? You say it's not a textbook, so what would that be?
Well,
Give us an
very
example.
simply, many of your listeners will know the Newbery Medal given by the ALA.
Right.
ALA Newbery Medal is for most distinguished writing for readers through 8th grade. No work of nonfiction has won the Newbery since 1988, which was Russell Friedman's photobiography of Lincoln. So there you have had an emphasis on fiction. ALA therefore created a second award called the Sibert, same age group, for nonfiction texts. Similarly, for YA books, there's an award called the Prince, which has once been won by nonfiction, so therefore that same group within ALA that deals with teenagers has created a second award.
Maybe we need a separate award for informational
Well,
text.
that we have.
we have.
We have, but the point is that those books which tend to win are written by an individual author who is looking at a subject out of his or her passion for that subject. Okay. That author is choosing words with the same care and skill and love as a fiction author, is concerned with pace so that what he or she is telling us has a beginning, middle, and end.
You know, I have a question that just occurs to me now since we've been having this conversation. Yeah. Since curriculum isn't mandated, how do we ensure that schools are going to be selecting these kinds of readings rather than going back to a textbook?
You can't ensure that. All you can do is say, here's what the standards are. And I will say that the people I know well at Student Achievement Partners, you know what they say the secret to Common Core success, and I pass this on to
Pass on your wisdom, please.
Yes, independent reading. The child who reads a lot, whether that's manga or anime or dystopian romance or nonfiction, is going to build up the vocabulary and the thinking skill that is going to allow that child to do better in a Common Core universe. So we can't guarantee but we can say this will help.
Yeah, I said again, as we said at the previous show, I know, I do understand what you're saying, because I certainly do see many children who come into the, grown-ups who come into the college setting, the community college setting or college setting, lacking a content base, and that somehow this kind of information that students need isn't necessarily given to them. On the other hand, as someone who's an English professor and who's read so much fiction, when I hear people talk about informational text helping students to establish a point of view, I think of so much fiction that is all about point of view, and that it's a little harder sometimes to get the point of view, and doesn't that make that a little bit better? Especially, by the way, you said this, the 11th and 12th grade emphasis on informational text being 70%, I think. To me, that's the one time in life when students are mature enough and ready to really tackle some of the fiction that may be eluding them when they're younger, to really get a sense of character and point of view.
They absolutely should be.
So that,
and
you
let
know,
me
is
get
a misgiving that I have. But
I understand. Let me get to one point. One of the three key shifts. The first shift is to content-rich nonfiction. The second shift has to do with finding evidence in the text, finding details and evidence in the text. The third is exposing young people to ever more complex text with its discipline-specific language, so that young people are going to take in literature that is more challenging for them. So this means that it's not just in 11th or 12th grade that you're going to get the Odyssey, that you're going to get George Eliot, that you're going to get authors like Hemingway who have actually disappeared from the high school curriculum. We're saying bring in more challenging text, can be fiction, can be nonfiction. Let me talk quickly about point of view in nonfiction. Traditionally, children's nonfiction, or children's middle grade YA, wanted to seem to not have a point of view, because again, we were trying to be reliable. What we're saying is authors should put a point of view in their own point of view.
Make it transparent.
Make it transparent. Make a case. Make your case. Global warming is human caused. Global warming is not human caused, because young people are surrounded by those arguments. And where's the place where they should be exposed to and debate? Is Obamacare a good idea or is it a bad idea? Well, in school, where they are going to be exposed to op-eds, where they're going to be exposed to a book that makes an argument. And then they can begin to develop that skill to assess for themselves that argument.
Now this means, to me, this requires a shift in teaching as well. How do we prepare teachers to be effective teachers of this?
Well, I will say that New York in particular, in part because it did take a lot of Race to the Top money, has done quite a bit of professional development for teachers and librarians. It is a step up. It is a challenge. I do think one mistake in the Common Core is that the assessment of professionals, teachers and librarians, was woven in too quickly with the promulgation of the new standard.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. In other words, I think in an ideal case, we would have had a year or two of kids, students, schools taking in the new standards, developing teaching practices, seeing what worked, sharing success stories, et cetera. And I should say an advertisement here. We at Rutgers on February 7th are holding the first conference that brings together two principals from New York, teachers and librarians, to talk about collaborative strategies for Common Core success. So I think we and others certainly are doing professional development and training. The other thing is I would urge anyone listening this to go to a website called Engage New York. Engage New York
We'll put that up later too.
has quite a bit of information. And there are a group called Expeditionary Learning has created some very, very interesting modules for ways to bring Common Core into your classroom. Depending on who you are as a teacher, you're either going to take this whole cloth and do it, or you're going to say, hey, those are kind of interesting. I'll map that to the books I have success with.
So this issue of assessment, as you know, became a big controversy and a brouhaha here in New York when student test scores were so low. And of course, it really created, I think, a backlash against the Common Core. Was that misguided? Is the problem not the Common Core itself, but as you're saying, the rollout of the Common Core?
Yes, I absolutely think it was a mistake to have the assessment, or at least to tie the student assessments to the assessments of professionals. I think once, because you create an anxiety matrix. The teachers are worried about their jobs, the administrators are worried about their jobs, the librarians are worried about their jobs. This is communicated to the students who are also facing new and difficult tests.
What would be a better way of doing that?
A 2-year moratorium students are obviously going to be assessed, but in which we wouldn't tie APPR, SLO, professional assessment to student performance, because this is different. And the other thing I would say, and this is my personal opinion from no one else, I actually think we have to split Common Core into 2 meanings. And this is what I mean. For kids who are in elementary school, even through early middle school, Common Core is going to be great, because it's going to be your experience of education. Each year is going to build on the prior year. Your skills, your educational muscles will grow year by year. So when you get to really challenging high school tests, this will be a world you've grown up in. For kids who are now in 10th grade and up, it's vertigo. Everything that you've experienced in education has suddenly been exponentially increased. And while that is a good map to what's coming to you in life later, it's a slap in the face. And I do think we need to think carefully about what are we offering to a 3rd grader and what are we offering to a 10th grader. And that's just realism about what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under you and a much bigger challenge put in your face. Now you can say, better to get that in 10th grade than in 13th grade when you're out of school and don't have support systems and don't have help. But nonetheless, I think we have to face how tough this is for kids and for all the professionals who work with them.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to get some other perspectives on the Common Core, so let's hear what they had to say.
I'm eager to hear.
And we're not going to hear anything, but you can pretend. Not going to hear a thing, I'm afraid.
That's fine.
Not a thing.
That's okay. We're attentive.
Okay, I'm going to give you a 5 count, and then when I get to 2, just turn back.
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There are obviously many different ways of looking at the Common Core. Going back to this teacher preparation part, I would imagine that if I were a teacher that I would have some anxiety about this. And you do mention that there should be a moratorium on testing. That testing, of course, you brought up one thing first, the linking the teacher evaluation to the test scores. And then there were the student test scores themselves. Of course, parents so much anxiety here in the city that suddenly their kids looked like they didn't know anything. Do you think as the Common Core gets put into place and put into practice, that's going to go away? We're not going to see that? Or
it's not that it will go away, but there are 2 factors here. One, again, the Common Core is meant to prepare for kids for life after school. There is a value.
There is life after school.
in beginning to face what that challenge is going to be. We have a friend who was just training in ROTC for the Army, and suddenly the Army, partially due to the sequester, but suddenly was decreasing radically the number of people it was taking. And its standards are quite much higher. But what I would add here is, I do think that the Common Core exposes what exists in society. Common Core exposes the gaps of wealth, of digital wealth, of family resources, of knowing how to use the school system to help your child get the teacher he or she needs or the support he or she needs.
How does it expose that more?
Because the standards are so high and so challenging, the child who isn't ready for them that's going to be there. So for example, talk about New York City, in Rochester, in Common Core there's 4 is the best score, 1 is there was a 5% rate of kids who got more than a 1. So 95% of the kids fell below the 1. The other thing Common Core has exposed, as we all know, are the achievement gap breaks with children of color doing worse and the gap being increased. But it's not so much increased to me, it's an X-ray. We are facing what our society
All
is.
right, now can Common Core close that gap, or don't we need to look at that gap in an income inequality perspective? And
Every time I
public-
give a talk on Common Core, I've given them all over the country, I say, look, the biggest single factor in educational outcome is income. If we could change that, it would trump Common Core. However, I also say to whatever group of educators I'm with, our ability to redistribute income in America is zero.
we pay ourselves more if we could do that.
Right. So I think while we absolutely need to acknowledge that poverty is the single largest vector,
Okay.
we also need to address what we can. And then this brings back, now this happens again to be my own passion, but when Common Core teaches you to focus on evidence, argument, and point of view, whether that's in informational text or in fiction or whatever, I actually think we have to think carefully about how to map that with technical and vocational training. Because I think if our goal is to prepare more of our students to have a good shot in life, to have a good chance to make money, to build a family, to have a nice place to live, to have all the goodies that we want, I do think we have to look at how Common Core reading, thinking, and writing fits for kids who aren't aiming at college but need those skills.
So some people have said, the Common Core, another problem is it's one size fits all. Are you saying then that it's not one size fits all, or that it may be, but we should look for some flexibility
It is
within
not
that?
one size fits all because, for example, if you
And is
look...
it developmentally attuned? That's been another criticism, that it's not developmentally appropriate at certain levels.
I think there have been people who've made bad choices of, hey, all my kids are geniuses, they're going to read this. However, if you look at Engage New York and you look at the kinds of materials that they say support Common Core reading, you know what they have listed there among the many other things are manuals. So kids who want to learn how to gain technical skills can do Common Core reading in a manual on, I don't know, something computer design or electrical design or plumbing. Plumbing is a very well-paying career, which can't be outsourced. And so I think that it's not, Common Core is not one size fits all. It's one size fits all if you believe that Common Core is training every kid for college. No, it isn't. It's training every kid for life.
Now, why the backlash then? It seems, from your perspective, well thought out, developmentally appropriate. Why the backlash?
Well, I think there are many reasons. On the one hand, the extreme or the more politically left people had some concerns because there was Bill and Melinda Gates money behind this, and
The corporate
supporting.
takeover of...
There's paranoia about Pearson, and is Pearson behind this? Is this corporate takeover? Are we somehow trying to make our kids into drones? The answer to that is teaching critical thinking seems probably not a great way to make drones, so I don't think that's so. On the far right, the Tea Party decided to make this their sort of new cause after Obamacare, sort of claiming that this was a federal grab. That's not true. It's not federal. So both extremes got involved that
The
way.
federals are a little bit with the supposed carrot of the race to the top money.
They're not.
I know you and I disagree, carrot or stick, but whatever. Right?
They're not completely uninvolved, but
Right.
it is not a federal mandate.
Okay, it is not.
Okay, then you have parents, and parents being concerned if their kids are either really distressed by the tests or find them much more challenging than expected.
What do you say to that? That's a big issue.
Well, look, I'm a parent. I have 2 kids in public school. And what I would say, of course, that's distressing. But again, if we are looking at the reason for this, is the moment to be angry if your kid doesn't do as well as you hoped on a 5th grade test, or when your kid graduates, goes to college, and has to be remediated? And has to be remediated such that now you're going to have bigger college loans because they're going to graduate later, so they're less ready for life. And so it's not fun to be up against this level of challenge. But on the other hand, it's better to get it in the school than get it when it kicks you in the behind, when you're out of school, and again, you can't get that career track in the Army you hoped for. et
I
cetera.
suppose that testing is a big issue altogether. I mean, there were testing issues prior to the Common Core. The whole
Right.
idea of standardized testing, and are we overemphasizing that? We'll have to wait for yet another segment. We only have 1 minute left, so I just want to ask you in that 1 minute, what do you want our viewers to know and understand about the Common Core?
What I would most hope you would all do is take a look at the standards for yourself and decide for yourself whether this looks like the kind of educational approach that you believe in, that you think could be healthy for your children or the children you educate. And if you think it's so, let's work to improve the Common Core as it should be, rather than wishing magically for something totally else.
Professor Mark Aronson, thank you for joining us on EdCast. Don't go away. Jim Carney had the opportunity to get another perspective on the Common Core. And then we will be back with this edition of Ed Bites.